What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So over the weekend, there was a ton of controversy and discussion around Dragon's Dogma 2 when it came to microtransactions, performance, Capcom's response, and even some of the record-breaking sales numbers that Capcom is already seeing. We're going to go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Grand Theft Auto 6, as it appears we could have some bad news, maybe the game getting delayed slightly behind the scenes. And then we're also going to be taking a look at Microsoft and what could end up being one of their big pushes for next generation, a handheld system. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early and ad-free. If you want to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're going to start today with Final Fantasy 16, as we did get a release date for the upcoming DLC Rising Tide, which you can see the trailer that they released. And a lot of this information came from Yoshi P at PAX East as he discussed Final Fantasy 14, Final Fantasy 16, and even mentioned Elden Ring as he pushed Final Fantasy 14, according to him, the expansion for that a week after Elden Ring's DLC releases. Anyway, Rising Tide, as again you see the trailer here, this is coming out April 18th, and they say it's an unmarked letter arrives at the hideaway containing a request most curious, the dominant of Leviathan. Long-lost icon of water is in need of rescue, so of course Clive has to set out with his companions to go figure out what's going on with all this. And yeah, I'm interested in this DLC. It is one of the situations where I haven't played the game in a little while now, and after playing so much of Rebirth, it's going to be a bit strange going back to that kind of control scheme. Just getting used to there. But yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun going through this DLC with Leviathan kind of at the center of it. So exciting stuff. Looking forward to this one here coming up next month. Also, we do have an update around the Mario Maker Wii U situation where people were racing to complete all of the courses, and there was one that was kind of a sticking point. Well, it appears we have a bit of a twist in the story, which you can see. This is posted up over on X from Oatmeal Dome, who says that Team 0% has cleared all Mario Maker 1 courses. Get this, the creator of Trimming the Herbs has admitted that it was an illegitimate upload. It was cleared by like a tool-assisted run where you can have kind of a PC do all the inputs and stuff, a computer, and it'll get you through with, I mean, incredible reaction speed. You saw with the level that was showcased there. It is incredibly difficult, and you could even, I guess at this point, say maybe even impossible for a human to complete. But they say The Last Dance, which was cleared, is the final legitimate course. This, of course, a few weeks away from the service shutting down with the online. But yeah, everything has now been cleared in Mario Maker 1. They've accomplished it. Good news there. But again, just a few more weeks for the Wii U shutting down. So if you wanted to go online and play a couple of different Mario Maker courses, you got a little bit of time before it's all gone. Oh, and it looks like Microsoft and Toys for Bob have reached an agreement for their first game. This was shared by Jez Corden over on Windows Central, where he says Toys for Bob, known for handling Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, is now working with Microsoft on their first game since going independent, which was, again, a kind of a weird situation, seeing it from the outside going on, where Toys for Bob split from Activision, Blizzard, and obviously Microsoft then, which, I mean, that is a better result than Microsoft just shutting them down. So at least we'll see something from them probably years from now. I mean, look, they may have already completed something before this split happened, so maybe there is a new Spyro game, something like that is in the works and coming here soon that they've completed work on. But I am curious what their first independent game would be, because the only indication we have, and Windows Central even paraphrased a bit here from Matt Booty, it's basically what you'd expect or what they've worked on before. So I'm thinking 3D platformer. I don't know if they are doing a Crash Bandicoot with them, a new intellectual property, Banjo-Kazooie, a lot of possibilities. Again, it's going to be probably quite some time before we hear about it, but it's good to know that they have at least had some sort of contract that they've been able to work out, and they'll continue working with Microsoft. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Dragon's Dogma 2, which found itself at the center of controversy online over the weekend, and a lot of it had to do with it being a full-price $70 single-player game with microtransactions that are more or less ways to fast-track you through certain parts of the game. More so, seemingly anyway, the early parts of it, but you can see some of the microtransactions here. I mean, there's 21 of them. It adds up to just over $41. The ones that people are really pointing at are, for example, things that will help you to fast travel. They have revives in here. You have currency with a bunch of different Rift Crystal options. But as I've been doing some more research in this, hearing more and more from people's accounts as they are playing through the game, they don't really feel the need to buy any of these. In fact, it's fairly easy, to a degree, I'll say, to get just about all this stuff. And as you get through the game, Rift Crystals, you get pretty consistently based on your pawns and renting them out, that sort of thing. But it doesn't seem like something that is like, oh, you have to go get these microtransactions. However, it does also make you wonder why they are there in the first place. The only thing I can think of is they must work, because Capcom has continued to do this for quite some time. Resident Evil 4 was a big one, Monster Hunter Rise, Devil May Cry. It's just every time these games seem to show up, there's a slew of microtransactions accompanying it on day one. There was some discussion around reviewers who didn't know about this, but it actually was in the guide, and basically none of them mentioned it, so that was kind of strange too. It seemed like at first Capcom tried to slip these in, but not the case. They were fairly upfront about it. As for me, my big issue right now is the performance and the DRM. And in fact, I think that conversation is being completely drowned out by the quote-unquote optional microtransactions. I think the fact that Denuvo is on this game is actually probably one of the reasons we see some of these issues around frame rate, as many times Denuvo gets removed from a game, even Capcom titles, and the frame rate all of a sudden jumps 10 to 15 FPS. And I have a feeling that's going to happen here with this game, and it'll probably happen whenever it gets cracked, and all of a sudden people who are pirating the game are having better experiences than people have legitimately paid at least, we'll say, $70. Anyway, we do have Capcom, who responded over on Steam, and with the paid DLC, they do mention that all items listed below can be obtained in-game or as paid DLC items. Just want to hammer home the fact that you can just get these games, including that warp location marker, the port crystal. And then for frame rate, they do say that they are going to continue working on this through patches and ways to improve it in the future, but it is heavily based on your CPU. So on your PC, you're going to want to double check to make sure you have at least a decent enough CPU before you jump in with that, because you may end up experiencing a lot of crashes or serious dips, especially around towns and well-populated areas. Otherwise, you might have to deal with the PS5 or the Xbox Series that seems to bounce anywhere from 25 to 40 frames per second whenever it feels like it. But with all of that said, the controversy, the argument, the microtransactions, the performance crashing, it still ended up being Capcom's most successful release on PC, and that includes over Resident Evil 4 Remake by a healthy margin, actually. We can see this over on SteamDB. The highest current player or concurrent player count that they recorded was over 228,000 players. The previous best that Capcom had achieved was Resident Evil 4 Remake at 168,000 concurrent players. Okay, yeah, so by more than 60,000 people, they were able to top that. So that is super impressive. In fact, if you ever look on Steam now, it's generally bouncing around between 150 to 200,000 concurrent players. This game is selling well for Capcom, which, I mean, for Dragon's Dogma fans, that's great news there. And there are a lot of people who just want this game to do well because, I mean, they may even want to turn into an entire series, although seems like it's every 10 plus years that you get a new game in the franchise. But Dragon's Dogma 2, if you step away from all the stuff around microtransactions, performance, that sort of thing, the game itself does look legitimately impressive based on the stuff happening in the open world. So I am going to be picking this one up, and I've been trying to decide where I'm going to get it. I think I'm going to roll the dice on the PC version and just hope that everything holds together in terms of crashing, because my GPU and CPU should be up to the task for this one to at least give me a good enough performance, but we'll find out. Let me know what you think about all the stuff going on around Dragon's Dogma 2, and even though we had so much discussion around microtransactions, it's still being incredibly successful. Next up, let's talk about Microsoft and apparently an Xbox handheld that they are continuing to work on. In fact, I think this is starting to accelerate to being a real thing, and in fact, may be a massive strategy for them going into next generation. Anyway, we can see this posted up over on Insider Gaming as they are sourcing the Xbox 2 podcast with Jez Gordon. They say, on the Xbox 2 podcast, Gordon said, I know that Xbox have got handheld prototypes right now. Gordon soon clarified these are new prototypes, not the old prototypes often referred to. As pointed out in the podcast, prototypes don't necessarily mean that new products are coming to market, but Xbox pursuing a handheld isn't at all surprising. Later on, he went on to say, no, not a cloud handheld, a fully native Xbox handheld, as in one that can just operate like natively, has hardware that's at least decent enough to push these games along in a handheld format. Like, you could look at it and say, okay, maybe a ROG Ally level, something there. These handhelds, generally speaking, 720p, 800p, upscaled to a 1080p like screen, is usually good enough because of the convenience that it brings with it. And I think this is going to be Microsoft's strategy for next generation, which is approaching faster than people realize if they are indeed looking to launch their next-gen Xbox family of systems, we'll say, in holiday 2026. They would start talking about it at the end of 2025 or beginning of 2026, most likely, after what we saw their roadmap for the Xbox Series when that was first unveiled at the Game Awards. It was out like 11 months later in November of 2020. And in this case, instead of the Series S just being a lower powered box, I think it'll just be a handheld, and then you also have a more powerful box, similar to what we have with the Series X as a counterpart to that, and it's just sort of working into the idea of Xbox Play Anywhere, on a console or on a handheld that we have now branded and set up as a native experience in that Xbox ecosystem. So you turn it on, most likely it'll have the same kind of OS look to it that you have on your Xbox Series now, and everything will just kind of work between them. To me, the idea of them continuing to push these prototypes just keeps leaning into the idea of that handheld, and with the handheld PC market continuing to pick up steam, it makes a lot of sense, at least from what I'm seeing now. And I think one of the biggest things they were running into, and Sony would probably run into this, is that it'd be very difficult to come up with a way to do an entire different physical format to accommodate a handheld system. These PC handhelds don't deal with that. There's no cartridge, there's no disc, nothing, right? You just download and you're just on your way. And I kind of think 2026 will also show that Microsoft is leaving the physical market behind when it comes to the games in general shipping on a Blu-ray, and that would play in perfectly to them having a handheld that does not have any slot for a cartridge or a disc. But interesting stuff there when it comes to Microsoft and their handheld. I would certainly want to pick one up, but let me know what you think down below. Next up, let's talk about GTA 6 and potentially some bad news in terms of it missing 2025. This was an article that was posted up by Kotaku, and as I was going through it, it seemed kind of strange because it was more or less pinpointing 3 different times that the game could come out. So Q2 2025, holiday 2025, or 2026, but they didn't necessarily seem very confident on any of them. However, this got the internet absolutely going crazy because it's GTA 6 and we want to play it yesterday with how good that trailer looked, or at least we want to hear more about it. So if it is indeed coming out in 2026, it just means we have to wait that much longer. But this is over on Kotaku, where they say Kotaku has also learned that it's becoming more and more likely the sequel might not land until late 2025. It's also possible it could even slip into 2026, as production reportedly falls behind. Leadership at Rockstar is nervous and worried about the game missing 2025 window and slipping into 2026, and is another big reason the company is pushing for a return to the office in April. Now, Rockstar and Take-Two have been citing security issues, and I mean, we had that big GTA 6 leak that apparently came from a Slack channel. So it's not unfounded to say, yeah, I mean, we'd like security to be much tighter than if it is done through remote work and things are getting emailed and dropped into different channels that potentially a bunch of people could be signed into, and I mean, that's what we saw happen there. And I will say, a lot of the article was also pushing back against the idea of people going back to the office, and I just think it's going to be hard to gain sympathy from people who may be reading it, and there's, I'm sure, a large number of people who are already back in the office. Like, they've already been pulled back in, and they're like, well, I mean, I'm in the office, I'm not necessarily going to go out there and push hard for people to be working remote when I'm not. It's kind of hard to again, get them kind of on that wagon. But in this case, GTA 6, holiday 2025 to me was my expectation. I don't think it's coming out first half of 2025. Holiday, like September, October maybe, makes the most sense. But 2026, that would be tough for Take-Two because they are surely banking on that game, like literally banking on that game being there in a holiday season for next year. So into 2026 could get a little dicey with investors, but we'll see. At this point, though, I wouldn't count on early 2025. Look towards that second half of 2025 for what will probably be The biggest release we've ever seen in gaming history. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about that Zelda movie that was announced right at the end of 2023. And it's an interesting thing to consider how exactly they'll be approaching this, but we have been getting bits and pieces as to maybe the style and the direction for this game. Like, for example, we can see this is posted up over on Nintendo Life, and they're citing Wes Ball, who's the film's director, as they say, known for the Maze Runner trilogy. They've told Total Film how he understands just how important the Zelda franchise is to fans and aims to fulfill people's greatest desires. Quote, "That's the thing I want to try to create. It's got to feel like something real, something serious and cool, but fun and whimsical." Okay. This is going to be very tough because, as they mention, there are some very serious things, themes, elements going into the Legend of Zelda franchise. I mean, that series can get pretty dark at times. You look at Majora's Mask, it is almost surprising that came from Nintendo, with people living out the last 3 days of their lives knowing that everything is about to end hours later. But in this case, yeah, you have to have this kind of contrasting world where there will be moments where it's very bright and colorful and happy, and then, just despair at times in wake of an overwhelming foe like Ganon or something. So I'm more interested in how the live action stuff will look, because I still feel like it has to be stylized in some way. Otherwise, it may come off as just looking cheap, generic, I don't know, corny. It's hard to put a description on it specifically, but I just don't think it would look great if they didn't dress it up at least a little bit. So it's going to be interesting when it comes down to seeing the first shots of it. You know, people are going to be all over, of course, really diving in and analyzing any little trailer that comes out. But let me know which direction you would like to see them take here, and do you think they're going to pull off The Legend of Zelda as a movie that's going to run for, 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours at most? And before we go to the comments of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, if Metroid were adapted into a movie or series, which direction do you want them to take? Look at that, 69%, good job everyone, animated, 31% live action. Okay, so I think if it's a movie, I wouldn't mind seeing them go the direction of live action, even though it sounds, I know people usually wince at the idea. It's, okay, hold on, we're gonna go live action with Metroid or Zelda. The sci-fi aspect to it, the fact that Metroid Prime kind of aims more for realistic visuals even, right? Or just graphically impressive stuff. I think it would work, but in terms of a series that could go 10 or 12 episodes, yeah, I think animated would be the way to go there. But really, I would just like to see Metroid really be spun off into something outside of just games as well, just to reach a wider audience, because I just think the story, the character, there's a lot really to dive into. And we'll finish up with the comments of the day. We'll start with this one here. This is posted up by Calling Cascade, who says, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, getting its patch right as I'm beating it, has the same vibes of the Red Dead port getting 60 FPS after I had beaten it. It's gonna be even better when the PS5 Pro comes out and all the complaining I've done about performance mode versus graphics mode is just completely erased. It's like, oh, I just have the PS5 Pro, I have the Pro mode. It's graphics, but at 60 frames. With my luck, after, say, 100%ing it over the course of this year, getting the PS5 Pro, it's just 4K at 120 frames or something crazy. And it's like, oh, great. Could have used that a while ago. But technically then I'd have the PS5 Pro lined up for whenever the final entry in the trilogy comes out. So I guess I'll be ready for 2028. We'll see. And then we'll go to a comment from the members video. This was from Snoopy, who says, are we surprised that Suyu got taken down at all? I see a lot of people honing on that name. It's like, well, I mean, it's called Suyu. Of course they're getting taken down. They're poking at Nintendo. But in that case, I think that was more or less a DMCA troll, or it was just GitLab just kind of getting out of the way ahead of time, premature, oh, you know what? No, we don't want to be here when Nintendo shows up. We don't want you to be here if Nintendo shows up. So go somewhere else and host this. That's really what it is. We're probably gonna see more and more of that. These larger sites, these hosting platforms, taking precautionary measures and just getting rid of them early. That's it, right? So that, I think, because of Yuzu and the fact that Suyu is a fork of Yuzu, there's still questions around that aspect with them relying on what we had previously with Yuzu. So that at least they're not doing anything with Patreon or bringing in some sort of revenue from it. So they're kind of avoiding that lane. But Something tells me we're gonna hear more and more about Suyu having to move around the internet, and it might not even be Nintendo doing it. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's Dragon's Dogma 2? Seemingly breaking records for Capcom with sales and concurrent player counts, despite all of the controversy with performance and microtransactions. And then also about the Xbox Handheld. Would you be interested in buying one, say if it came in at like $400 or $500? And then GTA 6, how likely is it that that game slips into 2026? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.